So eye of the storm, that's the phrase China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is using right now for the trade situation with America.
Hmm.
You can picture it, can't you? That kind of like deceptive quiet right in the middle, but, danger all around. It's a pretty vivid image.
It really is. Captures that feeling, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That things might look calm, but underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of tension. There's definitely more going on than meets the eye.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the whole dynamic between China and the U.S. on trade. We've got this really insightful piece from The Economist that kind of lays it all out.
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground.
It really does, from, those first tariff ideas under Trump to that whole 90-day pause thing that was supposed to, well, change things.
Right, that pause. It was meant to be a window, wasn't it? Right, a chance for talks, maybe cool things down.
Yeah.
But it didn't really lead to that big breakthrough everyone hoped for.
Exactly. So, listener, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to come away from this with a really clear picture of where things stand now, what's driving it all, and maybe where it could go next without getting bogged down,
Making sense of the complexity. Got it.
Okay, so let's start with something the article really hammers home. These current high tariffs, like that massive 145% on some Chinese goods, they're just not sustainable.
Yeah, and what's striking is who's saying that. It's not just analysts. The Economist points to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying it pretty plainly.
Right.
And even Trump himself has sort of acknowledged, that these huge numbers probably have to shift eventually. It's coming from inside the administration, too.
And you can already see the signs, can't you? Those exemptions they've made, especially for electronics like smartphones. It's almost like admitting, okay, slapping huge tariffs on stuff people use every day, maybe not the best idea.
Exactly. Those exemptions aren't just like technical tweaks. They show the real friction these tariffs cause for industries and, well, for us, for consumers. It's one thing to talk policy, another to see the price tag change on your phone. Yeah.
And then there was that whole thing with Amazon. Remember the talk about them maybe showing the tariff costs separately?
Oh, yeah, that caused a stir.
It really did. The White House reaction was pretty strong, calling it hostile, political. Even though Amazon kind of played it down. What was that about?
Well, it suggests they're pretty sensitive, doesn't it? About how visible those costs are to regular Americans. If people start seeing price plus tariff, it makes selling the whole policy politically much trickier. Raises that big question, who's actually paying for this?
Yeah, definitely. It also really shows how maybe unplanned some of this was. The article sort of reminds us when that first 34% levy was floated, maybe they didn't fully expect China to just match it blow for blow.
Right.
And then when China did retaliate, the U.S. response just pushed it higher. It wasn't exactly a carefully mapped out strategy.
No, it felt much more like an escalation cycle. Action, reaction, action, reaction. Maybe without a clear end game in mind for the tariffs themselves. And that's led us to this pretty complex spot we're in now.
So when you ask who's really feeling the pinch right now, the article argues pretty convincingly, I thought, that it might actually be the U.S. itself because of its own tariffs.
That's such a key point. And sometimes it gets lost. We focus on Chinese exporters. But yeah, those U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods, often paid by American companies importing them.
Which then means
higher prices for American consumers or higher costs for U.S. businesses using those parts. Whether Amazon shows it or not, the economic hit often lands right here at home.
So the obvious fix seems like, well, why doesn't the U.S. just lower its own tariffs? I mean, the article notes Trump signed tons of executive orders. Couldn't an order just bring them down?
Technically, probably yes. The power is likely there. But politically, that's the tricky part. There's this real reluctance to look like you're backing down, especially after all the tough talk on trade, which is why you hear people like Bessent saying, effectively, the ball's in China's court. They need to remove their tariffs first. It's about leverage, about perception.
Which, funnily enough, the article suggests has kind of given China, well, a bit of leverage, at least in the short term economically. If China did blink first, it might ease some pressure here. But the signals from Beijing, they don't seem like they're in any rush.
No. Not at all. And some of that rhetoric is pretty forceful. That Ministry of Foreign Affairs video calling America a paper tiger. Wow.
Yeah, and saying compromise won't earn you mercy. That's blunt.
It really is. It suggests they feel they're in a relatively strong position right now, maybe even, as the article hints, kind of enjoying the U.S. being in this slightly awkward spot.
And then that Beijing Daily piece bringing up Mao's on protracted war. I mean, that's sending a very specific signal, isn't it, about playing the long game?
Absolutely. Invoking Mao like that, it screams, we're digging in for the long haul. It suggests they're thinking strategically, long-term, and maybe short-term pain is acceptable for what they see as the ultimate outcome. They're ready for this to drag on.
Of course, it's not all smooth sailing for China either. The article is clear about that. They've got their own economic issues, deflation worries, that property market slump, and export orders looking weaker, according to that late April survey.
Right. Those domestic problems are real and significant for Beijing. Trying to manage a trade conflict while your own economy is shaky, that takes some serious juggling. That whole long war idea might sound good, but they also need people spending money now.
So you've got this economic standoff, which the article calls a negative-sum game, basically. Everyone kind of loses out.
Mm-hmm. Less trade, higher costs.
Right.
It's not good for either side, really.
But then it shifts to the geopolitics, which it frames as zero-sum. Like, America's loss is China's gain in terms of global standing. Can you unpack that difference a bit?
Sure. So negative sum economically means the policies hurt overall global efficiency, impacting both sides negatively. Maybe one slightly more than the other, but nobody really wins.
Okay.
But zero-sum geopolitically means it's seen as a direct competition for influence.
Yeah.
If the U.S. looks weakened or unreliable because of these trade fights, China sees an opportunity to step up, project stability, and basically gain credibility on the world stage, maybe at America's expense.
And they've got the economic muscle to back that up,
Right.
Being the biggest trading partner for, over 100 countries? And their role in Asian supply chains is just huge. The article had some big numbers for Japan, South Korea, Vietnam importing parts from China.
Yeah, that deep integration is key. It gives China enormous economic weight in the region. It makes it really, really hard for neighbors to just cut ties, even if they wanted to, which most don't entirely.
Mhm.
That interconnectedness shapes everything.
And this is interesting. Despite that economic power, the article notes that China's kind of defiant stance towards the U.S. isn't really being copied by its neighbors. You've got security ties, especially for Japan and South Korea with the U.S., and then Southeast Asia is trying to do this balancing act, right? Hedging between the two giants.
Exactly. It's complex geopolitics.
Yeah.
Economic ties pull one way, security concerns pull another. Most Asian countries don't want to choose sides outright. They're walking a tightrope, trying to get the benefits from China without alienating the U.S., especially on security.
And some of the things these neighbors are doing, it's quite strategic. Buying more American stuff,
Yeah.
lowering their own trade barriers, Vietnam cracking down on Chinese goods being sneakily relabeled.
Yeah, trying to stop that circumvention of U.S. tariffs.
It feels like they're trying to hand the U.S. administration reasons, face-saving reasons, not to just slap tariffs back on everyone after that July deadline passes.
That's a great way to put it. These neighbors have a huge stake in keeping things stable, so they're making moves that look helpful to the U.S., maybe hoping it creates an off-ramp for de-escalation without them having to directly challenge China. It's a very delicate diplomacy through trade actions.
And in the middle of all this maneuvering, you're starting to see potential winners and losers emerge among the neighbors themselves.
Definitely.
Like, Thailand apparently hopes to sell more dog food and fish to the U.S. if China's facing high tariffs. But then others are worried, right, that if the U.S. market is tough for China, all those Chinese goods will just flood their markets instead.
Yeah, that quote from the South Korean executive was telling, wasn't it, about maybe having to sell more stuff on Coupang, their local platform, if Amazon gets difficult for Chinese sellers.
Yeah.
It shows that fear of displacement.
It really highlights how connected everything is. U.S.-China actions send ripples everywhere. And you see countries reacting defensively, Indonesia going after textile smuggling, South Korea putting duties on Chinese steel, Japan taxing Chinese graphite.
Exactly. They're all trying to shield their own industries from these big shifts in trade flows caused by the U.S.-China friction.
So if you pull it all together, it seems like America's big dream of somehow cutting China out of Asian supply chains, probably not going to happen.
Very unlikely, given how embedded they are.
And China's hope of maybe getting all its neighbors to line up against the U.S. also seems pretty unlikely.
Yeah, the security relationships and desire to hedge are too strong.
So China's standing firm, saying it won't kneel down, but its neighbors are kind of quietly trying to help the U.S. find a way to climb down a bit.
That sums it up really well. You've got these deep economic realities in Asia, plus all the different strategic calculations by each country. It pushes against those extreme outcomes, total decoupling or a unified regional bloc. It's much more messy and multi-directional than that.
So that eye of the storm analogy, It still feels pretty accurate, doesn't it? This kind of tense, quiet, but so much uncertainty about what happens next. It really does feel like it all depends on whether someone, either side, decides to pick up the phone, as The Economist put it.
Right. And hopefully you, the listener, feel like you've got a better handle on just how tangled this whole situation is, all the different threads involved.
Yeah.
Hopefully without the headache.
Yeah, hopefully. And it leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Given how tangled global trade is and all these different strategies countries are using, what might be the unintended consequences? The longer-term ripple effects of all this friction, way beyond just the U.S. and China, something to think about.